Hello, this is BBC World News. I'm Karin Giannone. Our top stories: just 5 hours to go until Brexit. The EU flag is lowered at the UK's diplomatic mission in Brussels just a few hours before Britain becomes the first member state to quit the club. One of Brexit's driving forces, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, says it's a new dawn for the UK. I'll have the latest from London and Brussels as the Brexit process enters its final hours. Also ahead, countries take action to protect themselves against the new coronavirus, with almost 10,000 confirmed cases globally. And no more evidence. The signs from Washington suggest the Democrats have failed in their efforts to bring more witnesses to President Trump's impeachment trial.
If my Republican colleagues refuse to even consider witnesses and documents in this trial, this country is headed towards the greatest cover-up since Watergate.
Hello, welcome to BBC World News on the 31st of January 2020, Brexit Day. It will have a special place in the histories of both Britain and Europe. 47 years after joining and 3.5 years after the British people voted to leave in the EU referendum, the UK will formally leave the European Union at 2300 GMT. That's midnight in Brussels this evening. It's the end of a process which has stretched over years and which leaves one big question to be answered. What will the future relationship look like? We begin our coverage with this report from our UK political correspondent, Ian Watson.
The Union flag has been raised today over Parliament Square, not long before it will be lowered in Brussels. 3.5 years after the referendum, the UK will leave the European Union at 11 o'clock tonight. For some, the end of our 47-year membership will be a matter of regret. For the government, they say it's about renewal.
What the British people voted for twice in the referendum in 2016 and in the general election just before last Christmas is at last coming to pass. The most precious gift that Britain has given the world is parliamentary democracy. And we are restoring faith and restoring trust in that.
Boris Johnson was a driving force behind the campaign to leave the EU. He has a much bigger role now. Ahead of a cabinet meeting, he visited the industry centre at the University of Sunderland. This was the first area to declare for leave when the referendum results came in. But his message wasn't all about Brexit. He wanted to emphasise his work on the domestic agenda. Boris Johnson, a leading figure in the Leave campaign, now says it's his job to bring the country back together, and the official celebrations for Brexit Day will be relatively muted. There'll be a countdown clock projected onto the wall of Downing Street, and the buildings round here will be lit up in red, white and blue, the colours of the Union flag. But that'll be about it. He does not want this occasion to be divisive. And what does the former occupant of this place, the one that called the referendum, think now?
Well, it's obviously a very big day for our country. Obviously, I led the campaign to stay in, but I always accepted the referendum result and knew this day would come.
And after 11 o'clock tonight, what will change, apart from, the change? This is a 50p commemorative coin. The UK now enters a transition period where we still follow the EU rules until the end of the year. The Prime Minister wants to strike a new trade deal in that time.
It's a massive undertaking, and it's also very different from a normal trade deal, because usually we're trying to build, bridges and trying to come together and find an equal ground. But in this case, we're diverging to some degree.
Labour says the country is at a crossroads, and Jeremy Corbyn's more concerned about the prospects of a deal with the US than reaching agreement with the EU.
We need to ensure that we do maintain good trade relationships with Europe. We don't tear up all the conditions and agreements we've received, and we don't fall into the arms of free trade deals with the United States.
But there are signs that as Britain is leaving the European Union, another union, the one between the nations of the UK, is under strain.
Brexit has put Scotland on the wrong road, and the further down that road we go, the longer it will take and the harder it will be to get back on the right one. We need back on the right road as soon as possible.
It's now no longer in doubt that we're leaving the European Union, but the consequences for the United Kingdom are less certain. Ian Watson, BBC News.